Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Thru-Hiking Podcast. Today, I'm going to be giving long-distance hikers 3 great tips to save money when you go into town. And just to give a little background on this episode and why I've decided to talk about this, I am a founder of a long-distance hiking community called THRU-r, which is short for Thru-Hiker, and we have events where we talk about certain things. So this month, we're talking about finances on trail, how to budget, gear finances and acquiring gear, and how much should you spend, and all these things that hikers, have to budget for. And in one of our finance meetups that we just had in our Hiker Pro program, saving money in town came up because that's really something, at least for me and a lot of the hikers that were on the call, really spent a lot of money on. And I realized that over time, as I was hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, the Appalachian Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, that I spent so much money in towns. And so, you got to maybe budget for that depending on what your situation is. And on our call, one of our Hiker Pro members brought up kind of a rule of thumb. If you go into town, how much are you going to spend? So he said $10 an hour is what you spend when you go into town. And this is give or take. So for example, in New Mexico, things are relatively cheaper than if you would go into a town in Colorado. So Lordsburg, New Mexico is going to be quite different than Salida, Colorado. So we'll take that as a general rule of thumb, give or take. And in this episode, in this video, if you're watching, I'm going to give you, just based off of our great conversation in that meetup, our 3 top ways to save money when you're in town, when you choose to go into town, whether it's for a couple hours or if it's overnight. So the first tip, and this is actually something I brought up because of what I've seen over the years as I've been through hiking, long distance hiking, is embrace the Nero. What is a Nero? You might ask. If you're not a long distance hiker, if you're new to this scene, Nero is a day when you don't hike as many miles as you normally do. So let's say you hike 25 miles a day. That's kind of your, depending on the terrain and that sort of thing, that's kind of your average during a hike. That's kind of a lot for certain trails, depending on the trail. But let's just say it's 25 miles a day. So a Nero would be something far less than that. And there's a lot of gray area here as well for, okay, what is a Nero? Define a Nero. It depends on the person. So if it was for me, I would consider a Nero maybe, for me, it was more like 12 miles or less, 13 miles or less. I would say that's maybe a Nero. But for some people, it's 5 miles or less, depending on how many miles you hike in a day. So it's completely subjective. But when I say embrace the Nero, that means if you're going into town, maybe take a Nero into town. So not hiking. Maybe you camp 5 miles away from town, the town you're going to go into to resupply, to do your laundry, maybe get some food, all of that good stuff that hikers look forward to when they're on a long distance hike. So maybe you camp 5 miles outside of a town, hike into town. Maybe it's in the morning. You take a full day to do everything you need to do in town. And then at the end of your day, once you've done all the things you need to do, maybe had a little fun with a buffet, that sort of thing. Hikers know if you know, you know. Then after that, you hike out. Maybe it's a mile, maybe it's a couple miles, depending on where there's a place to camp. And that's really a great way to save. You'll be spending money, but this is a great way to save money because you're not spending the night. And so if we go back to the $10 an hour in every time you're in town, every hour you're in town, that will add up. So if you stay overnight, you're paying for a place to stay, whether it's a hostel or hotel or whatever it is. Trail Angel, if you give a donation to the Trail Angel. So you're paying for an overnight stay if you don't take a Nero and go in and out. So if you go in and out, you're saving that amount of money and you can roll that over to the next town, maybe if you do want to splurge on a stay or that sort of thing. So embrace the Nero is a good one. I know quite a few hikers who were on a budget when they were hiking, and costs have really gone up since 2020. I hiked the PCT in 2019, the Pacific Crest Trail in 2019. Things look a lot different now on these trails as far as pricing, prices for food, prices for resupply, prices for gear if you need to replace your gear. So budgeting may be more important than ever for long distance hikers. And I know quite a few hikers who did embrace the narrow every time they were in town because they were on a budget and it worked great for them. The second tip for saving money when you're going into town as a long distance hiker is embrace the hiker box or raid the hiker box, however you want to say it. Embrace the hiker box. So whenever I would go into town, my first stop, if there was a hiker box in town or a hiker box at a hostel, that would be my first stop before I go grocery shopping or anything else, or even before I make food. So there might be something in the hiker box that you can take and make dinner if you don't want to spend money in town. Supplement your resupply. So there's usually a lot of great stuff in the hiker box you could take and then have that be what you start your starting point for your resupply. And then you can go from there. So you can save money by embracing the hiker box. And for those of you who don't know what a hiker box is, a hiker box is just an area, usually a box or some containers of things hikers leave behind that don't, maybe they sent themselves a box to a town and they have too much food that they sent. So they just throw that in the hiker box for another hiker to come by later and pick up if they need it. So it's kind of like a little system where, hey, I don't need something, but I don't want to throw it away. So maybe another hiker could use it. Let me throw it in the hiker box at this particular hostel or at the post office or wherever there's a place that hosts a hiker box. So raiding the hiker box first thing worked really well for me. Leave some stuff for other hikers too if you can, but it's a great way to supplement for your resupply. Get great gear that someone else doesn't want. I found, I believe, it was in Pie Town at the Toaster House. I found a really long-handled titanium spoon that wasn't even open. So I swapped out my little spork that wasn't working great for me, which maybe somebody else could use, for that titanium spork. So it works for gear, it works for food. It's come in handy so much on trail for me. So let's say you raid the hiker box, you get some maybe mashed potatoes, tuna packets, whatever it is, ramen that you can use to start off with your resupply. I'm just throwing this one in as a bonus to kind of go with the food situation. If you can find a dollar store in town, wherever you are, that's usually a good bet to save a little bit on resupply. So that's throwing that one in there, which is a great way to just save a little bit more money versus going to other stores generally. And the third top tip for saving money in town as a long distance hiker is, I'm just going to say this as a quote, sharing is caring. So what do I mean by that? Sharing expenses. So let's say you're going to stay overnight in town, you're hiking with some people and you really get along, you trust them. Maybe you share the expense of a room. Sometimes hostels have private rooms where it might make sense financially to get the private room and split that versus just getting a bed. So split the cost of lodging if you can. If you trust the people, do that on your own risk and your own discretion. But if you have a trail family, that makes it really, really great. I've saved a lot of money by utilizing my trail family, staying with them. We usually agreed on where we wanted to stay and that sort of thing. So share the expenses, share the lodging expenses if you can and if you trust the people you're with. And also sharing bulk food items. So if you're going shopping and you know that your whole group would love olive oil, maybe everybody uses olive oil and they have their own little containers to put olive oil. You buy, a bottle of olive oil and divvy it up between all of you and then share that cost. So there's so many things. If you want to pack out arugula, maybe you share that arugula. You buy a bag of arugula, share it, and then, whoever is partaking in that can pay you back using Venmo or whatever it is that you share the money transfer with. Another example would be bars. If you love Cliff bars and they come in a 12-pack, maybe you only need 3 for that stretch. So you share with your trail family members or other hikers in town. So to recap, 3 great ways to save money in town if you're a long distance hiker is to 1, embrace the narrow, 2, raid the hiker box, and 3, embrace sharing. Sharing is caring. I hope this was helpful for you and for the podcast. Since we're in the middle of up-leveling everything, we have new episodes every Monday. We changed the name of the podcast even. I'm going to be doing more solo episodes to help new hikers prepare for trail, give tips. Maybe weekend backpackers are listening in and they want tips from long-distance hikers. I will be talking about what we're talking about in the community on Thru-r, like what we did here, giving my own tips thrown in there to help you guys prepare for trail and have thriving hikes going forward. So I'm looking forward to doing more of these. And if you guys have any questions or comments, you can email us at info@thru-r.com. That's THRU-r.com, info@thru-r.com. Thank you so much for listening today, everyone. And until next time, happy hiking.